morning. Welcome to our Friday IL discussion. For those who have not met me, my name is Catherine. I'm a project coordinator here at Lehigh Valley Center for Independent Living, and my preferred pronouns are she, her. Visual description, I am a white female. I have shoulder length, a little bit longer than shoulder length, black hair that I'm wearing down, and I have on a navy top with some floral prints on it. Coming to you from our office here in downtown Allentown. Quick logistics for today. First of all, we want to welcome Maggie from NAMI with us. We'll hear about her a little bit later, but some logistics for today. So we are going to record today's session, and we will post that recording to our YouTube channel. We do invite our participants to turn their cameras on to kind of make it feel a bit more like we're together. If you're not comfortable with that, we totally understand, and you're welcome to turn it on or turn it off as the session goes throughout the morning. Captions are available through Zoom. You just need to click on the show transcript or captions button, depends on what version of Zoom you're using, and then click on show subtitles to turn them on. Our chat is open today for questions or comments. You are also welcome to unmute and ask your question during that time period. So, quick biography about Maggie. Maggie has been the executive director of NAMI, which is the National Alliance on Mental Illness, Lehigh Valley, for more than 6 years. NAMI strives to improve the quality of life for individuals living with mental illness and their family members. Maggie is also a certified NAMI Smarts for Advocacy trainer. She started her involvement in politics and government at 6 years old by stuffing envelopes at her father's campaign. Maggie has continued to be involved with legislative advocacy for end-of-life care and mental health care at the local, state, and federal levels throughout her career. Prior to joining NAMI, Maggie spent 20 years in the hospice care field as a volunteer director and state association administrator. She also serves as a member of the board of directors for Equilibrium, a therapeutic riding program in Nazareth. She has lived in the Lehigh Valley since 2013. And so with that, I will turn it over to Maggie for our presentation today.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Okay, with that, I'm going to jump in. So we're talking today about, oh, I'm sorry, Catherine, do I have the ability to share my screen?
You should have that ability.
All right, I will do that in a moment. And I'd like to keep this we're a small group, which lends itself to discussion. And so I'd like to keep this open. And I know that some of you have experience in advocating. So please jump in if anything does ring true or doesn't, or there's anything that you'd like to add. You will notice that because this is a presentation developed by NAMI, it is focused on mental illness, but the things that we're going to talk about can be used in any kind of advocacy. It's also somewhat focused on talking to legislators, but again, you can use the way we're talking about structuring your story and some of these methods to talk to anyone, to advocate for yourself individually, as well as to advocate on behalf of a cause. So just please keep that in mind as we move forward. So we're going to talk about the importance of telling your story, whether that's live or written. Talk a little bit about tips for setting up a meeting with somebody that you might want to be advocating with. And then we're going to spend some time on how to tell your own story for advocacy. Stories are incredibly effective, and we're going to talk about that a little more. But you might be telling your story not only with legislators, but donors to an organization that you're associated with, or the media, or a provider that maybe you want to see if you can advocate for change in the services that they're providing, or even for someone like an employer or a landlord. And you can use this information to tell your own story, and you can use this information to teach other people how to tell their story. And I'd also ask you during the course of the presentation to think about your own personal journey and your story. And then if we have the time at the end, we'll do a quick first draft of your own story. So with that, I am going to share my screen, I think. Not giving me the option.
It's not, okay, let me see.
Hold on. Nope, I'm sorry. It is.
Okay,
I'm challenged by technology this morning, apparently. I apologize.
it has been the theme for the last 2 days for me, so you are not alone.
All right, thank you. All right, I'm going to leave this here instead of going full screen. Can you see a slide on your screen?
So
Yes.
I'm seeing the slides and then your previews
Yeah.
on the left.
I'm going to leave the previews up.
Okay.
Just because this way we can see one another on the side. So why are stories important? Why do we want to tell our stories? And there are lots of reasons to tell our stories, just entertainment, inform, educate, building relationships with other people, teach. But what we're talking about today is telling your story and your experiences in the context of making an ask for something. So this is a very specific use that we're talking about. And stories have been proven to be much more effective than facts and figures alone in changing attitudes. And that ranges from mental health to just about anything else. And your lived experience, our lived experience, has value, it has meaning, and it is going to be meaningful to other people. Telling, excuse me, telling your story really helps with understanding the full impact of a mental illness or a disability or whatever it is that you're talking about. And remember, if you're talking to legislators, yes, you're definitely asking them for something, but you're also helping them. You're giving them information that they need that informs their work. I don't know how involved any of you have been in government, but legislators especially, and other elected officials as well, have to keep track of all sorts of issues and really stay on top of what's current. So by talking to them, telling them your own story, your own experience, you are helping them as well, and they're going to be grateful that you have done that. So we talked about this being a very specific way of telling stories, and some stories can be more effective than others. We've all had the experience when somebody has launched into a long-winded tale of something, and 5 minutes in, they're still trying to figure out whether it was Wednesday or Thursday that this took place and what they were wearing and where they were going, and they haven't even gotten to the beginning, and you're just thinking, oh. So in this case, we really want to be effective and to the point. So it's important how we tell the story. And these are, as we said, these are our stories that we're telling, our own experiences, and they matter to us. But in this case, we're going to have to leave out some of the details. We all want everybody to know the full story and what the impact was and all parts of it. And that's great. And there's a time and a place for that. But this is different. You want to be brief and to the point and leave the listener wanting something more. Use emotion sounds a little manipulative, and I don't mean it that way at all. But I'm saying that emotion can factor in to your telling of your own story, but you don't want to get overwhelmed by that emotion. If you're in telling your own story, maybe at certain parts of it are going to really almost sort of break down with emotion, that's not going to be effective in this case. If you start to cry or something like that, then it sort of takes the listener out of the story. And now they're feeling, you don't want them to feel sorry for you. You are helping to explain to them the implications of your experience, and then broadly what that can mean for other people. You're not there, because you want them to know just how tough it's been. You want them to know how tough it's been, but what helped and where you're going with that. Try to stay positive rather. And in telling your story to people, it doesn't have to be, perfect and polished. And that can actually come across as being somewhat canned. So practice telling your story to the point where you're comfortable with it. There are parts, if there are parts that you stumble over, think about those. Maybe you can take them out. Maybe there's a different way to say something, but you don't have to be by any means perfect. You don't want to be overly practiced. And remember that you're relating the story to something that you're asking for. So all the details are going to be related to whatever it is that you're asking for. So NAMI teaches that there are certain steps to telling an effective story. And the first one is step 1, and that's simply introducing yourself. And you'll want to tell people, particularly if it's an elected official, where you live. Are you in their jurisdiction, their district? And then explain your relation to the story. Are you going to be talking to them about you, about a family member, if you're a provider? Is it about the people that you're serving? And state the intent in the beginning. If you're there, and for example, to support a particular bill that might be up for a vote in a chamber, say, I'd like to tell you why your support for House Bill 435, don't Google it, it's a made up bill, is important to me. And then they have the context for it. The second thing you'll do when telling your story is describe what happened before you received help. So, and here is a point where you do want to be specific and bring in some details. And the example that NAMI uses is not, my son struggled with his symptoms, because we don't really know what that means. But instead, something like, because of his mental illness, my son was unable to hold a job and became homeless. And then you're really giving them a picture of what was going on. And then step 3, you want to describe what worked, and when we go into the examples, we'll talk a little bit more about that. And again, I'm going to keep saying this, but relate the story to what you're going to be asking for. And then end on a positive note. And, again, this is a mental health example, but what we like to do is demonstrate that treatment and support are effective for most people. And then, describe, so now you've said where you or someone else was, where you began, what kind of intervention there was, and you're going into how things are different today. What happened as a result? If you simply say, there was money available for treatment, that's great, but you want to go a step beyond that and say, because I received treatment, X happened. And if you're talking about a situation where the outcome wasn't good, you can flip it and talk about what would have worked. The example here is, if there had been funding for whatever, my son might have been able to. And make sure that the listeners know what really made a difference. And the next step is to make this more broad. Make sure they know that you have your experience, our experience, that's unique, but you're not the only one in this situation. That's why you're there talking to them. This is a broader need. Other people have some of the same needs. So you'll want to describe what would help others. And, this makes your personal experience really relevant. You're going to be building a connection with the legislator in this case. And then finally, when you get to the ask, and it's interesting because all of us, and heaven knows when I started doing this, I was one of them, forget to do this. We've told the story, the person who's listening, whether it's somebody in the media or whoever, has reacted positively, but then you forget to make the specific ask of why you're there. So consciously remind yourself to do that. Thank them for listening. If it's somebody like a legislator, an elected official, ask them if they'll support your issue. And if they say yes, that is absolutely terrific. Thank them for their support. If they say no, or they're non-committal, that's fine. Leave the door open, thank them again. And, this could be the beginning of a relationship with that individual. I've been in meetings where legislator said, gee, I'm not sure about this particular bill because of X, Y, Z, but we leave our information behind, and then lo and behold, the next time something around mental health comes up, they call us. They're looking to us as a source, saying, is this affecting other people that you know? Would this be a positive thing? So it can very much work that way. But getting a no is not necessarily a bad outcome in this case. So questions, I've just gone through a lot of stuff very quickly. Questions on this part, or comments on this part? Is it all fairly clear? I know some of it seems obvious, but it's amazing when you get in a situation, how it can feel different. So if you're going for a meeting, just some basics, know your issue, know why you're there. Try it out on someone else when you're rehearsing. Anticipate the questions that people might ask. It's really helpful to look and see if there's similar legislation in process. You don't want to put yourself in a position of going in and asking the legislator to sponsor a bill in the House or Senate if there's one that's already active. And there's a website there, and Catherine, if you'd like to send this out, I'm quite comfortable with that. But there's a website there that you can use, and it's searchable to look up similar legislation. And if you don't know the answer to a question that comes up during a meeting, that's fine. Just let them know that you'll get back to them, and then do that. Knowing that the policymaker or the media person or the donor or whoever you're talking to. I just noticed, who sees the mistake on the slide? Catherine does. Go ahead.
Pat Toomey is no longer our senator, is now John Fetterman.
Yes, thank you. I will make that correct. I knew that, but I'll make that correction. So know your policymaker. Understand their role and what's under their control. And possibly you all know this, but I have very often had people come to me and say, we really need to meet with someone from the state. And what they're talking about is a federal issue. And the state legislator is not going to be voting on a federal issue and has absolutely nothing to do with that. So make sure you're talking to the right person. And there are many resources for finding out who that is. You can just Google them. Or there are sites where you can by address look up who your representatives are, your elected officials. And you can Google their media, social print, or broadcast media. And if they're running for office, they have campaign pages that'll give you a lot of information about what they're interested in. So if you're taking somebody else to a meeting with you, which I would absolutely recommend you do, make sure you know who's going to be doing the introductions, who will be opening the meeting. Try to mention something positive that the legislator has done. And maybe it's somebody that you don't agree with and don't think they've done anything positive around your issue. Again, use the search, and maybe they were the guest judge at a dog show last week. At least you can say, and you have dog, for example, you can connect on that level, but try and make that connection in the beginning. Be aware that the legislator themselves or family member or friend may have a similar issue to the one that you're discussing. Try not to let that get derailed. If they want to tell you about their own experience, that's great. But then bring the conversation back to, my story is similar, for example. Don't argue with them. This is not the time. You are there to share information with them and to make a request of them, not to engage in an argument. I said earlier, you don't have to have all the answers. If you have a fact sheet or other materials about the issue that you're discussing, it's great to leave those behind. And if it's a specific bill, what the bill number is, and of course, thank them again. You can't thank them enough. And it's absolutely fine to ask for a picture. If this is, say, a media person or a legislator, or to invite them to an event that's coming up. If it's a picture and you have social media, or an organization that you're with has social media, post it and tag the legislator, because that'll really give you visibility as well as them. And follow up with a note. It can be by email now, just nobody's using snail mail. Although handwritten notes do feel special because they are so rare these days. If you have an event coming up and you want to invite the media person or legislator or whoever to that event, have a role for them. Doesn't have to be a speaking role, We just had a community dinner, and we have had elected officials come to that dinner and announce raffle prize winners, served the people who've come to the dinner, et cetera. But have a role for them there, and have someone who is assigned to hosting them, so they don't just walk into a room full of people and not know what's appropriate or not appropriate to do. In terms of the legislature, if you are meeting with a legislative staffer rather than the elected individual, don't be disappointed by that. Staffers are the ones who are doing lots of the really tough nitty-gritty work. They're the ones who have the knowledge. They are writing the bills or helping to write the bills. So, that can be a really good, effective meeting as well. Again, in case of legislators, if you're a constituent of the person, that's most effective, but it might be somebody who has a particular interest in the issue that's not necessarily your own legislator, like a committee chair or a caucus chair, or you just know that they're interested in. If you can do one-on-one meetings, that's really effective. Emails, calls, mail works too, but make them as individual as possible. If you are mounting a sort of campaign for a particular issue, if 5 people send an email, that's good, but it's not as effective as big numbers. This is most effective these days in big numbers because every organization is sending out legislative alerts to their membership, and you've probably all seen them, that have, boilerplate text, and you sign your name and send it off. Now, if, as I said, an office gets 5 of those, they're going to note them, and that's it. But if they start getting big numbers very close together, the staff is going to notice that, and they are going to say to the legislator, it can be the same with media if you're trying to get them to cover a story. Gee, we all of a sudden have a couple hundred people who have contacted us today about this issue, and maybe we should be looking into it. Okay, so couple sample stories. So the first one is somebody who is talking about herself, and she introduces herself, says she's a member of NAMI, and explains very quickly what NAMI is. And that gives her some credence, just saying she's a member of a larger group. So they know that, this is likely to be a reasonably mainstream approach, might be a different approach, might be a new approach that you're telling them about, but grounded in things that a group believes. And then a description of what happened. I was married, had a successful career, never imagined I would experience a mental illness, started seeing a therapist after experiencing nightmares, nervousness, problems going to work. And, her initial thought was that a few sessions and this would all be fine, but the symptoms got worse. And then as a result, she's saying she lost everything. Went to a psychiatrist who diagnosed with schizophrenia, and then found her way back. And says, one of the things that the psychiatrist had said was having schizophrenia did not mean that her life was over. And he gave her hope. So today she's working again, volunteering with NAMI's In Our Own Voice program, which is a program we have where people tell their own stories. And then, why this is relevant. Many people, and that's a place where you could quote a statistic, have mental illnesses like mine. Not everyone gets the help they need. And then describing what will help others, which is a strong mental health system in this case. And then wrapping up by saying, thank you for meeting with me, listening to me, and can I count on your support of this mythical bill, HB 435. I actually like this story a little bit better because I think there's more detail and it's more relevant. This is a story being told by a provider about one of the people that the organization is serving. Again, she identifies herself, where she works, and what they try to do. And then she uses the example of a client named Lucy who came to them, says she was penniless, homeless, estranged from her family. She had been in the state hospital and was referred by them, was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, and began taking medications. And then they go through the services that the agency provided, placed in the care of their psychiatrist, established an effective medication regimen, began treatment with a therapist, case manager helped with some practical issues, and they hooked her up to their clubhouse for vocational training. And then as a result, what is different today, and this is a huge success story, you know, this happened over the course of 2 years. The woman is now living independently. She's working part-time. She has interests such as singing in her church choir, still continuing treatment, attends monthly dinners. So the organization is continuing to support her, but not with the intensity that they had to in the beginning. And she has reconnected with her family and joined NAMI. Excuse me, the sister joined NAMI so that she could continue to support her in her recovery. And then the need or the problem is, here's an example of treatment working, but it's not available to everyone. Again, strong mental health system. So count on you to protect mental health services. And this might be in relation to a variety of issues. Okay, so any questions to this point? Okay, fair enough. I'm going to assume that means I've been absolutely clear and complete and thorough and all those good things. So here's the fun part. Since we have some time, which is awesome, you're going to have an opportunity to tell your own story. And I won't insist that you read them, although when we finish, I might ask for a volunteer. And, you know, we're going to do this in about, let's call it 10 minutes. So, you know, you're not going to be able to draft a complete finished story in that amount of time. But let's try, if you're willing, let's try it as a starting point. And you can see on the screen, and I'll leave this up, the structure that we're proposing for effectively, and you can choose who you're telling the story to, whether you're advocating for yourself individually, or whether it's for media coverage of an issue or someone giving money to a particular group or cause or legislator. That's entirely your choice, but the elements are the same. So you'll want to introduce yourself, you know, 3 to 9 sentences, what happened, what the problem, the issue was, what helped, and, you know, with as positive a tone as possible. And then how things are different today, how whether the issue was solved or you are experiencing recovery or just the way something improved in your own life. And then what the broader need is, and this can be pretty quick. And moving from that to what will help others, and then finally the very specific ask and thanks, ask for a commitment and thanks. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's take, I have 10:38. Let's take 10 minutes and start to draft that. As I said, I'll leave this slide up. Now, if you're finished earlier, just jump in the chat. And if we're all finished early, we'll continue on to the discussion. Okay? Have at it. So how did it feel to be writing your story and fitting it into this structure? Was it helpful? Was it difficult?
I think it was helpful to have the structure broken down specifically, like into how long to make each portion, because sometimes we can get stuck in one area.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. Catherine, did you want to add anything? I saw that you had unmuted.
So I actually had the opposite. I think for me, like, and maybe it's my need to perfect things. Like I started out and I'm like, no, that doesn't sound good. Like that's not compelling enough. And but I think as I went on, I was like, you know, just putting me out on paper is the first step. It doesn't have to be pretty.
Exactly. And you know, I've been honing my story for a while. You know, every time I tell it, I find something that I want to do differently or better. And so certainly in 10 minutes, wouldn't expect perfection. Would either of you like to share what you wrote? And you don't have to do it word for word. You could say in this section I talked about. You don't have to.
Well, I'll talk about like my introduction. I started out with the whole angle of coming from an organization, and then I stopped that and I switched and went to my personal, and then I went back to the organization, and I realized I was having trouble like compartmentalizing them. And so, you know, it was very interesting. I think maybe that might be why I didn't get as far.
That's okay. No, that's great. I mean, that's a wonderful start. You know, to build on that from there and go in whatever direction or both directions for different purposes. It's great.
Can I
Jamie.
do a quick run through of mine and see what you think and see if you can help me maybe?
Sure.
Okay, so I'll just do it because if not, I'll get lost.
Okay.
So I'm Jamie Clendenning and I am from Shippensburg. I am the founder of I Can and I Will, an online blog and Facebook group for people with disabilities. My story starts in December of 2011. I was told that I needed to have a tether cord spinal surgery in order to prevent my spinal cord from severing itself. I walked into that surgery and I woke up a T10 and complete paraplegic. I was sent home with no ramp, a borrowed wheelchair, and a bathroom that I could barely fit into, and I wasn't able to leave my home independently or go anywhere. After that, I felt very abandoned and lost. I had already lost my physical abilities, but then I lost my independence and myself. And it took me a lot of personal research, money, and persistence because I was only given 30 hours of physical therapy a year, which wasn't enough to really actually rehab me or give me the ability to even try to walk again. And after a lot of research, money, and time, I have a proper ramp, a bathroom that fits me. I just within the last year, even though it's been 11 years, have a van and my specialized license that I can drive with hand controls. And my situation is very similar for other people as well. They go into a surgery or they're in an accident and they have become paralyzed and they get sent home with nothing and nowhere to turn and no information on where to get what we need. So my ask is for systemic change so that rehabilitations actually would provide that information to a first-time paraplegic. And it would have all the local resources in it, where to go, how to get started. But it even goes further than that. I think it should work in a cycle with the insurance, the durable medical equipment, and the hospitals and rehabilitations all working as a unit and treating the body also as a unit. Because if we could actually formulate change in the rehab where we can actually be rehabilitated, we could be more structurally sound, we could get back out into the community, we could be an active member as opposed to being stuck in our homes and stuck in our chairs as well. So that's mine.
Great. Wow, Jamie, I think that was awesome. You talked about, you know, the starting point, and then what happened, what the problems were, along with, I like the idea that you mentioned the secondary losses, things like independence. And then in this case, you really are the one who fixed it yourself. It took, you said, time and research, and you know, that really builds the case for what you're asking for, which is change within the facilities and to support. So, and I think you could take that story and use it with a number of different audiences, talking directly to the facilities themselves, talking to legislators, if there was a way to legislatively help with that, or if maybe it's the insurance industry that needs to be revamped. I'd be right with you on that one.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I'm just thinking, if they're preventative instead of, after the fact, like there's so much data on like bed sores and, like just different
Yep.
things. Like if we could be more preventative as opposed to responding afterward, it would
Right.
be so much better. And like I was working up until the day of my surgery, the day before I went to work. And then I want to be out there working. But
Yeah.
now if I go to work, the other portion of it is if I go to work and I make too much, then I can't get the equipment that I need. And then if I get the equipment that I need and I get better, but I'm working, you know what I mean? It's just like the whole wheel is kind of like, it has a couple flat spots to it.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And you're right. And then there's a need for reform with that system too. And your story, along with others, certainly would support that too. So thank you. I'm 11, but I really want to thank you both for listening, and great job on your stories for different reasons. But in both cases, it's really nice to hear that either challenged or helped. So any other questions or anything that you would like to add before we close?
No, I just want to say thank you. I appreciate this so much. I'm just trying to learn as much as I can, and this was really helpful. So thank you.
Great. And thank you, Jamie. And Catherine, you have my contact information. So if there's any way I can help, or at some point in the future, if you want another set of eyes on a story or set of ears, just let me know. Don't hesitate.
All right, we will do that. Thank you so much, Maggie, for being with us and giving us this structure to help us create our stories.